It's time for Midday Edition on KPBS. Today we're talking about the history behind San Diego's Filipino food scene. Then we'll take you to the Fringe Festival and give you a preview of art you can see this weekend. I'm Jade Hindman with conversations that keep you informed, inspired, and make you think. A new exhibit showcases Filipino food culture and its history here in San Diego.
When you think of Filipinos, most of it really relates the most common of like pancit and lumpia, right? Food. But we want to expand upon that.
Also, Beth Accomando takes us to the San Diego International Fringe Festival, and Julia Dixon Evans gives us a weekend preview. That's ahead on Midday Edition. The rich and vibrant history of Filipino food culture in San Diego and the community that drives it are the subjects of a new exhibit. It's returning to the San Diego History Center and will give the community a taste of history and, of course, lots of good food. My next two guests are here to talk more about the exhibit and the stories they're bringing to the table. Dr. Tina Zarpour is the VP for Community Engagement at the San Diego History Center. Also with us is Joe Mazares, the chair of the Council of Philippine American Organizations, also known as COPAO. Tina and Joe, welcome to you both.
Thank you.
So, Tina, I'll start with you. Tell us about the Taste San Diego series and what it's all about.
Yeah, we like to think of Taste San Diego as a brand to the San Diego History Center. We opened our first exhibit just over 2 years ago, and it was called Taste San Diego Craft, Community, and Culture, and focused on San Diego's unique craft brewing culture. And we featured that history in the exhibit, as well as an experiential component with beer docents to do beer tastings on the weekends. And in the last few months, we've closed that exhibit and are now shifting gears and have been working with Joe and the committee from COPAO to develop what we see as a next iteration as Taste San Diego, Filipino Culinary Journeys. And we've had a lot of fun working with the committee. The difference here is that we're actually expanding the concept. I think we're integrating more culture and history and more contemporary culture, as well as opportunities for learning about food and food tastings as well.
That sounds great. So, Joe, what was the inspiration behind this exhibit?
It really was not so much about the food, but again, knowing that it's the San Diego History Center. And prior to this, about a year ago, I was brought in to do All in San Diego. I know Tina will talk a little bit about that later, but it was to interview different individuals in the Filipino community representing today's community members. And from that was kind of this discussion of like, wouldn't it be great to have another exhibit that focuses on the Filipino community, especially in San Diego? And when you think of Filipinos, most of it really relates to the most common of like pancit and lumpia, right? Food. Mm-hmm. But we want to expand upon that, really kind of look at people and places. And then when I thought more about it and then talking with, like I said, community members and committee members that helped put this exhibit, we really wanted to kind of shine kind of this development of our community from its foundings primarily as an immigrant community with the Navy Stewards. Mm-hmm. And then now going to some of the more celebrated chefs like Tiramisu of anime. And in between that are all these different stories of, restaurants and the uniqueness of the different restaurants, like our point joints, or we call them turtle, that people go to, which is uniquely Filipino in terms of a fast food casual makeup. The Seafood City, which is the first one in the nation that was here in National City, that was first built here. And then, I got in touch with some folks in Palawan, Philippines, that started a craft brewery, and its iteration came from San Diego, where the individual kind of lived in San Diego, got into craft brew, and then said, let me take one of these kits and start craft brew in the Philippines. And so they were the first one that's developed. It's been there and helped generate 34. And the last one is we just finished creating an exhibit in Chula Vista, the Filipinos of South Bay, and one of the parts of the exhibit was featuring the family Lumpia. Mm-hmm. The family Lumpia is based in National City, but they were kind of like a mom and pop lumpia business that got a contract and are now available in all the Navy exchanges throughout the world.
Wow.
So then looking at like San Diego, sometimes gets overshadowed with some of our bigger metropolitan areas, but our community is very rich and vibrant and has all these contributions, not only just in the city, but beyond the city.
Well, and there's a long history there, too, with all of this food. What are some of the unique aspects of San Diego's Filipino food scene that you're highlighting here?
Yeah, again, we are looking at not only just the restaurants, but also in our home lives. So really helping people kind of remember a little bit of their history of like before we had Seafood City, Island Pacific, or 99 Ranch, or even Wuchi Chong, if some people can remember that, most of us had to grow our foods in our homes. So we have a little bit of exhibit that references an homage to our backyard gardens. We think about the food offerings to those who've passed on in our altars in our homes. And we even have kind of a little makeup of a Filipino kitchen that people will find there. So, one of the neat things that we have is this juxtaposition of someone who was a Navy steward who actually worked in the White House. And we have some dishes on display from the White House. And next to it is a reference to the famous comedians Joe Coy, who did a little YouTube Tupperware commercial. And so you'll see how Filipinos have saved Tupperwares or different kind of plastics in their kitchens as reusables. But again, it just shows about our thriftness and frugality and a little bit about that history of knowing that, the immigrant generation came from the World War II generation, which was a much more frugal. And then, of course, now you have folks who have the capacity and a little bit of wealth to be able to afford a nice fine dining meal at Anime.
And the committee has really pushed us to, as an exhibit team and as a museum, to really kind of have new ways of thinking about process and exhibits and what we bring to the light, and the idea of we've already shied away from, we already dismissed the idea of curating, right? And it's really like, it's that idea of working together in that conversation of like, okay, this is significant, but how is it significant? Why is it significant? Let's work together. Let's communicate that. What's the important message to communicate to the audience about this, right? It's to really bring that sense of family, identity, place into the exhibit. It's a limited space. Always in a museum, we have limited resources. How do we really try to communicate some of these complex ideas around the theme of culinary journeys?
Mm-hmm. I mean, a big focus of the exhibit was to make it more of a community-oriented experience. Can you talk about that and some of the ways you're really bringing the San Diego community together?
Well, I think we do that at the History Center in a lot of different ways and a lot of different projects. For us, the way that we approach exhibits is an exhibit is a process and an exhibit is a manifestation of a relationship and a set of relationships. Most of the exhibits that we take on are working with community partners of all different stripes, groupings and themes and topics. Joe mentioned briefly our All in San Diego initiative, which is kind of a brand new arm of the San Diego History Center that we've launched in the last year and a half, primarily with some funding from the state museum program grant. And it's basically focused on community history archiving and how do we collect and show the history of San Diego as it is experienced by people living today. And that, the San Diego of the last 50, 60 years, that maybe the San Diego History Center, we're trying to shift our mode of collecting from being passive into a more of an active mode of collecting and an engagement. Because an exhibit is one way that we're working with the Filipino community and Copao specifically. But our commitment to showcasing that history or to preserving that history really goes beyond the exhibit. I think this exhibit is a point in time for us, and an exhibit is the most public invitation. We're in Balboa Park. We have to take advantage of that setting. We have a lot of people that wander in wanting to learn about San Diego, and this is an important and critical piece. And I think working with the committee, I think everybody is so vested in this, and we've had work parties and everybody coming in and making things and ideating, and it's been really wonderful. we've learned and we're learning as we go along too, and how, how we do things and shaking things up a little bit.
Yeah, that's great. And of course, you're highlighting some of the tastemakers in our region. How are you featuring chefs and local food vendors? What role did they play in bringing this exhibit together?
There's several ways we've looked at how to activate the space. So, most times when you think of an exhibit, museum exhibit, there may be kind of areas and times during its duration that you'll bring in a speaker. Maybe you may do a food demonstration. And of course, that is something that we plan to do. We may have a karaoke night that's there. But we've also gone out and done some interviews with some key individuals, like of course, Tiramisu, with Chef Larry from VAS Enterprises, with a couple that opened up Mochi Natix Donuts, and we've done some interviews with them. So we'll have pictures of them highlighted on display, but we will edit the videos and have those videos available for people to watch and see. So this, again, is hopefully an extension that lives beyond just the museum, that is archived in the history for others to see. And then on the experiential side, every weekend we hope to be able to have, we won't say hope, we will be having food and beverage. Obviously because of the last exhibit, the History Center had to invest in a kegerator.
The kegerator.
And so we sat there and imagined, said, there are Philippine branded or Filipino inspired. So when guests come, you'll be able to kind of have a tasting of either some Filipino beers, flavored beers, ginger beer, like an ube ginger beer, or coffee, an ube flavored coffee, and calamansi lemonade. And then on the savory side, we definitely will have, dishes of pancit, maybe some lumpia once in a while, and then desserts. And so all these are provided by local businesses, and we'll be able to kind of showcase them and show them. And I think that's one of the most remarkable opportunities when we talk about an experience and activations, that not only get to see and read and kind of learn a little bit about history, but then you get to experience it and kind of feel it through these foods, and also know that you're supporting small businesses here in San Diego.
Yeah. Now, one thing I've never heard of is an ube beer. What does it taste like?
It could be a little bit on the bitter side for some people, but it doesn't have that sweetness that you would think with your ube cookies and such. But it's very flavorful as well. It's a little purple.
I tried some yesterday.
Yeah.
I was surprised. It was really good. I shouldn't have been surprised, but it was very, very tasty. I had no problem slurping that down. So
yeah, okay, that's very interesting. Well, speaking of chefs, as you were just talking about, we actually sat down with one who contributed to the exhibit, Chef Larry, or Larry Benares. He's currently the executive chef at Viejas Casino. We asked him about why it's important to bring this history to the forefront.
I think what we want to do is introduce, number one, people to our culture, our influence here in Southern California, and our great food scene, our great restaurant scene, and what we do as chefs, American-born or migrant chefs, to come to have people experience our food more. And again, it's a shame that we don't have a rightful place. We don't stand shoulder to shoulder with all the other great Asian foods, that we always have to explain ourselves. And it's pancit, and it's lumpia, and some people know about adobo.
Well, something that stuck out to me, Joe, about that was breaking stereotypes and going beyond the dishes that everybody knows. I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, that's what's deeply embedded in this exhibit. When you take a bite out of Filipino cuisine, you actually are tasting the richness of our culture in terms of, the history, the colonization of influences, the traditions that we maintain today, and as well as kind of our indigenous roots. And we forget about that. We forget about how Filipinos really is an agglomeration of all types of Asian cultures as well as U.S. culture here. And so there have been spurts in time that we've gained some notoriety. I mean, a decade ago, we had folks like Andrew Zimmerman and Anthony Bourdain that kind of highlight Filipino food. New York Times, about 5 years ago, talked about it as kind of one of the next big craves, and, kind of dissipates, and now it's back up on an upswing, especially locally. And I think that's just one thing for us as a community and culture to talk about. How do we elevate it, how we embrace it? And the hardest thing about that, I would say also, to the point is that the Philippines has, over 7,000 islands, kind of three major areas. And when you think of the Philippines and you think about a nation state, the one thing that's really unique is that each region has their own interpretation and influences. So if you're in the South was really influenced by Indonesia, and kind of your fragrances from that space, versus the North is more Chinese influenced. And so you can tell that from the different types of rices, the different types of noodles and dishes. And I think that's the hardest part, is that because you go to a Filipino restaurant, when we have it here in San Diego, that even for Filipinos, it's hard to kind of say that claims that this is kind of our dish, because it's much more family-oriented, it's much more home-oriented, and people will compare it to what your mom or grandmother made it, right?
Right.
So it's kind of hard to kind of have this kind of national, flavor. We know it's a dish that like adobo becomes the defunct kind of national dish, but the way it's made can be very different in terms of having spices or vinegar or no vinegar, or dry or not dried. And I think that becomes part of the difficulty of how to translate that to the American palate or to a more general palate, to say that, oh, this is what adobo tastes like. But you go to another restaurant, it's like a little bit different.
Yeah.
Yeah, but, again, we have much larger communities these days, and especially when you think of San Diego, where 2 out of 3 Asian Americans are Filipino, that every kind of industry, workplace has a Filipino and knows what a Filipino party and a potluck is. So it's rising. It's raising the profile, and I think it helps that at one level we have the national notoriety from like someone who's getting a James Beard Award that then influences everything on the downstream.
Yeah.
What do you hope people take away from the exhibit and San Diego's vibrant Filipino food scene?
Well, I hope that they see a part of San Diego that maybe they didn't understand that was even there. Right. It's part of that hidden story, those untold stories of San Diego. We know about 60% of our audience is from out of our county. And I think the tourism bureau, speak of what San Diego is, or what people come to San Diego for is, sometimes they come to Balboa Park, but they know about the beaches and they know about the beer culture and they know about certain things, but they don't know really all of the aspects of who we are as a community and the fabric of how we've, how that makeup has happened for San Diego. So, those opportunities for us to highlight the local chefs and makers and have people experience Filipino cuisine. I think it's going to be also very unique in the park, right? We've already had a very positive feedback from the folks that have come. We've done some preview weekends, and staff from around the park have come, and things have sold out, which is really nice. So it's something that is it's a taste of San Diego that you're not necessarily going to get if you're just here for a week. So
yeah, Joe, how about you?
Yeah, what I want, or what we hoped for visitors to experience, is that understand a little bit more about Filipino culture, more than just the pancit and lumpia that they've been served, right? But more especially is for our kababayans, our countrymen, and especially the younger generation, that this is history that's not taught in our schools. Right. It's just limited. And so this is an opportunity because, we've been in San Diego, Filipinos, being we, have been in San Diego, dating back as far as the Spanish galleons. And we know that history hasn't really been fully documented. And so this gives an opportunity for 2nd through even 6th generations of Filipinos even living here in San Diego. One, to get connected and get to know San Diego History Center, because we know a lot of local residents also may have not visited. Secondly, that these our younger generation begins to kind of be inspired and think about opportunities and careers in the culinary industry, but then also give reverence to our families, and especially our parents and of course the Navy stewards who started from humble beginnings, and had the opportunity and promise as immigrants. And then from the succession of kind of their children have now kind of been able to kind of raise and elevate the community in many different ways. And so that's what I hope the takeaway is, that not only just instilling a sense of pride, but then being able to kind of maybe think about getting into deeper conversations and be a little bit more introspective, and hopefully being able to kind of promote more about what it means to be Filipino, more than just food.
Yeah. I've been speaking with Tina Zarpour, VP of Community Engagement at the San Diego History Center, and Joe Mazares, Chair of COPOW. The exhibit Taste San Diego Filipino Culinary Journeys will have its launch event today at the San Diego History Center from 6 to 8 p.m. You can register online. Tickets are $10. Tina, Joe, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for the time. Appreciate you.
Coming up, Australian comedian and storyteller Matt Harvey recounts workplace tales anyone can identify with.
It was really interesting to have this, what I call a intercontinental trauma bond over poor government choices.
Arts reporter Beth Accomando previews a San Diego International Fringe Festival with Harvey when KPBS Midday Edition returns. You're listening to KPBS Midday Edition. I'm Jade Hindman. The San Diego International Fringe Festival kicks off what it calls 11 days of eyeball-bursting shows. This year, there are 45 shows from local, national, and international artists. KPBS arts reporter Beth Accomando speaks with Australian comedian and storyteller Matt Harvey about his show, Wage Against the Machine. Take a listen.
I first saw Matt Harvey perform Wage Against the Machine at New Zealand Fringe in 2023. That same year, he came to San Diego Fringe to do a show called I Was Bit by a Monkey Once, for which I gave him the first Fringe Geek Award of Appreciation for a show, because he made me laugh at his poor life choices and was the only show to include zombies. I love following fringe artists. Take Wendy Wanaz, who was here in 2016, and this year returns as Mae West.
And I've come back from my comeback tour, that's the name of the show. I was the highest paid actress in 1934. I pushed female sexuality in a way that was very masculine at the time. I came up to men and I made them feel like a piece of meat, you know what I mean? You know, I was very subversive about it, very, very specific, and then they tried to censor me. I got arrested in 1927. I went to Roosevelt Island for 8 days for my play Sex. That's right, the police came in. It was I'm trying to remember, it was so long ago. I think corruption of youth was the charge, yes. Then they came back again the next year for drag. And that's what attracts me so much to this Fringe Festival. It's 100% uncensored, which is exactly the way that I like it.
And just to give you a little more sense of the diversity of Fringe offerings, here are a few more artists with quick rundowns of their shows.
My name is Jacqueline Witt, and I'm the director of a show that we are calling Alteration. It is a combination of the way that kind of like fashion really like molds your lives, and like the removing of layers, the adding of layers to really create like your own style and really express yourself through fashion. And we're using circus as a story to tell that.
I'm Sarah LeClaire, and I'm representing Riot Productions. Our show is Death and Murder and Poison and Scene. And we sort of asked the question about this wacky murder mystery, A Perfect Crime, which is the longest running show off-Broadway that still has a 1-star Yelp review. How has it been there for 30 years with the original cast? And because they killed a bunch of people, obviously, and buried their bodies in the wall. So that's what our play is about. It's a silly murder mystery where the cast is trying to keep everything from going off the rails while trying not to murder each other, sometimes successfully, sometimes not.
I'm Corey Hammond, and I am in Riot's production of Death and Murder and Poison and Scene. And I play Alice, the stage manager, who very motherly, very militant, puts up with everybody in the show, all the diva behavior, all the method actor behavior. At first I'm a little worried that things are going off the rails, but then, you know, at some point you gotta give up and just lean into it and watch the train wreck. So that's kind of what Alice does. She tries to help when she can, and then she sits back and watches the house burn down.
So hi everyone, I'm Izzy Salant. I am the writer and performer of Do Better, which is part of, it's from Spot Corp Events, which is the company that we run. Do Better is a one-person comedic drama with magic, or as I'm calling it, a dramagedy, that explores how we navigate life after unwavering grief. Sometimes the only thing you can do is laugh at the pain and do a card trick, and that's what we're doing.
I'm Peyton Ashby. I also work at Spot Corp Events, which is producing our show. And Do Better is really honestly, I viewed it as a method for catharsis. It's a vessel of being able to tell our stories in a way to hope that others can heal from.
And now to Matt Harvey. Here's a clip from his show, Wage Against the Machine, at New Zealand Fringe.
Attention all staff, attention all staff. If anybody sees Marcus walking around today, be sure to stop and congratulate him on the fine work that he's done keeping these people safe. Now guys, I don't know if you remember till about an hour ago when I introduced myself. My name's not Marcus. My name is Matt. It says it very clearly on the name badge I was required to wear as part of my uniform. She didn't even take a second to break eye contact and confirm. She just wanted a big moment on the radio. It didn't really matter to her who I was, as long as she got to look good. I might not have been as miffed about this if Marcus was also a redhead. But guess what, guys? Not only was Marcus not a redhead, Marcus didn't even work there anymore. Marcus had quit a full year before this even happened. So I was nobody to her. I was just a ghost in a uniform, just serving the duty of keeping everybody safe.
So these stories are all stories about my old dodgy jobs, this thing called robo-debt, which I got a $20,000 unlawful debt from the Australian government, and to cap it all off, the time I broke a 100-year-old roller coaster.
And I got to see you perform this show at New Zealand Fringe a few years ago. Have you changed it at all? Does it feel more relevant now? How does it?
Yeah. So I've tightened it up a lot since then. Cut off some of the extraneous stuff. The show's done a fair few festivals since you saw it, and I feel like it's a much better tourable show. But it definitely feels a lot more relevant than it did. Like I remember just feeling like I was complaining about this thing that had happened. And as much as I wanted people to know about it, it still sort of felt like it was this thing that was in the past. But I will tell you this, the New Zealand government is looking to introduce a similar process, the automation of welfare, the kind of thing that led to robo-debt in the first place in Australia. So in particular, in New Zealand, it feels more relevant than ever. But I feel like governments have swung quite hard towards a lot of these conservative ideals and these ideals about saving money and cutting back on budget. And that was the starting point of the conversation for robo-debt, which was we need to cut out the fat and cut out the faff and make sure that the welfare system is running as efficiently as it can. So I feel like there's just echoes of this one thing sprinkled throughout the governments, at least in the Western world, increasingly.
And bringing this show to the United States at this particular moment in time, how do you feel audiences might be reacting?
I'm extremely curious about that. The landscape has evolved so much. I mean, I took it to Wellington where you saw it, and I took it to the Edinburgh Fringe, and I was like, is this going to be relevant to these audiences? And it was wonderful to come off stage, especially the free fringe environment where people connect with you quite closely. They'll see you on the way out because they'll donate to you on the way out. They had all these stories that they wanted to share, and they wanted to tell me about their own government and what their own government had done. And it was really interesting to have this, what I call a intercontinental trauma bond over poor government choices. So I just feel that even if the exact machinations might not play out in your government, there is something for us to bond over, and it's when governments make poor choices.
And you have taken various shows to various Fringe festivals. What is it about Fringe that appeals to you?
Fringe is great. I wouldn't have this opportunity without Fringe. So Melbourne, where I live, is a very blessed city in that we have both a Fringe festival and arguably the world's largest comedy festival. Maybe Just for Laughs in Montreal is the biggest. It's one of those two. That opportunity to try something, to test the waters, to build a show that might not have the legs in a mainstream art. That is what I find fascinating about Fringes, and that's why I've gone to so many of them, and I just keep trying to find new ones where I think the messages and the stories will be relevant, and try and find audiences who are looking for a different story or just want to hear something or know a little bit more about Australia as a country, where because I feel like we're this weird little mystery at the bottom of the planet that people sort of have an understanding about, in that there's sun and beaches and not much else. And so I just want people to sort of understand that we're just as troubled and flawed as anywhere else. We can share. It's fine.
And what would you tell people coming to Fringe who maybe have never experienced it? Do you have any tips for how do you fringe properly?
How do you fringe properly? Oh, what a big question. I tend to, so I go see a lot of shows when I do Fringe. And that's the joy of it for me, is just seeing how artists try different things and artists express themselves globally, and just seeing what's on the scene. I'll be in Reykjavik in June, and I'm very curious to see what the Icelandic artistic scene is going to be like, because I'm sure it's not all Bjork, and I'm sure it'll be a really interesting experience. So sometimes it's just, is the show name interesting to you? Does the show have an interesting image? If you're the kind that will actually read a show description, is there a theme in there that resonates with you? Even if it's the smallest little thing, you should probably give it a go. I know that the cost of living is quite tough at the moment, but I feel like a lot of Fringes are tailored towards the more affordable end of the arts. We're looking sort of $10 to $20 a show. If I find that's a sort of global consistent, and the nice thing about the Fringe Festival is you sort of have that ability to take a chance. There's not a cast of thousands, with understudies and extremely expensive theatre that you need to cover the cost of. You can sort of keep costs low enough that I can sort of take a one-man show to many countries and do okay.
You talked about your show being a storytelling comedy show. How would you kind of describe your style or your approach to comedy?
Haphazard. I mean, you got to sort of throw stuff at the wall until you find the stuff that sticks. It's in the first show, it's just a lot of mistakes that I made. That was choices that I made that were silly choices, and that formed the central theme of the show. This show is sort of more stuff that has happened to me. A lot of it is consequences of choices that I made, but I feel like it's the opposite end of that spectrum. And when you start to get up in front of people and share those experiences, you'd be surprised by how much people resonate with even little things, the tiniest things that I didn't think people would connect with. Like, how many people can say that they've broken 100-year-old roller coaster? I'd say almost none. But that story, people just really connect with it, and people just sort of get what it is and why it happened, and how these sort of things can happen. And there's just a big, I don't know, thrill in meeting someone who has an experience that you can resonate with. Especially, I'll go back to the government of it all. In the middle of my show is this big rebuke of the Australian government. And I think sometimes it's just good to be able to see that there is somebody else who understands, and somebody else who has a similar enough experience that you can be like, hey, you should check this thing out. We've got this thing going on. And when you go up on stage and you allow yourself to be a little bit vulnerable, as well as mix those jokes in there, because the jokes, to get all Mary Poppins about it, the jokes is the sugar, the spoonful of sugar, and the story is usually the medicine. And so you get up there, you have this story that on the surface shouldn't be, like Robodebt shouldn't be a funny story. A lot of very dire things happened. There was what I would call some major malfeasance of government practices, but you find the right approach. And I've trialed and errored this story many times, and I've had to reshape it and take bits out and move stuff around and find the smooth texture that makes it palatable, I guess, in this format. But yeah, it's a lot of trial and error. So it's, if you're ever thinking about comedy, just know that it's a lot of audiences just being like, no, that's not it. And they're always correct. Like, it's never them, it's always you. You've done something wrong, and you've got to figure out how to fix that.
That was Fringe artist Matt Harvey speaking with KPBS arts reporter Beth Accomando. San Diego International Fringe Festival runs today through May 25th at multiple venues with its home base in Balboa Park. Coming up, Julia Dixon Evans shares all her top arts and culture picks for the weekend. KPBS Midday Edition is back after the break. You're listening to KPBS Midday Edition. I'm Jade Hindman. This weekend, theater is the top ticket for arts around town. The San Diego International Fringe Festival kicks off, and several local theater companies are opening new plays. We also have a fresh dose of visual art, dance, and music. And joining us with all the details is KPBS arts reporter and host of the Finest podcast, Julia Dixon Evans. Hey, Julia.
Hey, Jade. Thanks for having me.
Always great to have you in studio. So let's start with theater and Jaja's African hair braiding at the La Jolla Playhouse. I'm really looking forward to seeing this one.
Yeah, so this is written by Jocelyn Bio, and it came straight from Broadway, where it had its run extended several times, so you know it's good. This is set in Harlem in a hair braiding salon, and it follows a group of West African hair braiders and the neighborhood women who frequent it. And the plot centers on the mother-daughter relationship between Jaja and her daughter Marie, who just graduated high school. It's directed here at the Playhouse by Whitney White, who was also at the helm on Broadway. And yeah, this opens in low-cost previews on Saturday with the official opening night next Friday. It'll be on stage through June 15th.
Okay, Moxie Theater has a new show that's opening up. It draws on service work. Tell us about The Counter.
Yeah, so this is playwright Megan Kennedy's dramedy, and it just debuted in New York also in the fall. It's about a waitress, Katie, and her customer, Paul, who comes in every single day. And they have this imbalanced friendship. One of them can leave whenever he wants, and the waitress cannot. And we see that the characters develop this relationship together. They deal with grief, depression, and above all, loneliness. And at Moxie, which is this really great theater tucked away unassumingly in a strip mall in Rolando, it's directed here by Desiree Clark Miller, co-stars Kate Rose Reynolds and Mark Stevens. Opening night is Friday, and it's on stage through June 1st.
And one more in theater, the Wagner New Play Festival wraps up at UC San Diego this weekend.
Right. This is more than a new play reading series. These are full productions of plays by MFA students at UC San Diego. And in the past, this has helped launch the careers of some really great playwrights. It's been running since the beginning of the month and finally wraps up this weekend. And there are still some shows with tickets available. Mylan Gray's Mother Loss. This one's about a grieving son who kind of finds his mother in a dream and then delves into it. And you can join the waitlist for some of the other projects as well. These are at various stages around UC San Diego, including the Playhouse.
Well, what's new in visual art this week?
There's a new exhibition that is opening up at the Bonita Museum and Cultural Center. It's called California Grown Plein Air. And there was an open call for plein air art that features San Diego County farmers and produce. It was judged by Katie Stokes, who is the editor of Edible San Diego magazine. And there's dozens of artists with work in the show. It includes scenes from farmers markets or flower fields and lots of our local farms. And it'll open up with a paint out on Friday morning, and then the opening reception is on Saturday from 2:30 to 4:30 at the Bonita Cultural Center.
And there's only a few weeks left to see American Minimal at San Diego Museum of Art.
Yeah, and I finally had a chance to see this a couple weeks ago, and it's really this interesting collection of contemporary minimal pieces, and it's really quite big. It takes up a bunch of rooms in the museum. It centers on the museum's Frank Stella piece and also has work by Ellsworth Kelly, Gary Lang, John Cage, and then Dwayne Valentine's sculpture, just to name a few. And while you're there, be sure to pop upstairs because there's also this, it's a much smaller exhibit. It's a modern printmaking in Mexico exhibit. It's really fascinating. That's all at San Diego Museum of Art.
We have a few options for dance this weekend, ranging from ballet to contemporary. So what do you know there?
Yeah, let's start with San Diego Dance Theater. They're having their spring showcase, including all of their dance class performances for all ages, and a showcase of the San Diego Dance Theater company dancers. And this is just on Sunday at the Lightbox Theater in Liberty Station, and they're having two shows, 3:30 and 5:30 p.m.
And in ballet, we have a classic Shakespearean story.
San Diego Ballet is doing their production of Romeo and Juliet. Its artistic director, Javier Velasco, has restaged this and kind of abridged not just the script, but like the score to prevent it from overpowering the story. But mostly he's distilled the story down to focus on just the love story between these two characters. There's two shows, 2 p.m. and 7:30 p.m. on Saturday at Balboa Theater.
Well, and for some family fun, there's a music and art festival coming up this weekend. Tell us about Golden Palooza.
So Golden Palooza is a brand new festival. It's in Golden Hill, and it has some live music from like family-friendly groups. There's School of Rock is doing some performances, the Golden Hill Elementary Middle School Choir Club, and more, even some performances from San Diego Junior Theater. And most of the festival is free, but you can buy an art experience pass. That gets you access to a bunch of hands-on art-making activities, including a zine-making workshop. But there are some free interactive art installations that you can do even if you don't buy that pass. There's a community canvas and then this community weaving project. And this is all on Saturday from 11 to 5 at the Golden Hill Rec Center.
All right, so let's talk about live music. What are your picks?
So the big news is this weekend is the Wonderfront Festival with 3 days on the waterfront with some pretty big names. There's Daniel Caesar on Friday. Saturday is Janelle Monáe, Foster the People, Portugal the Man. Sunday, Jason Mraz, Khruangbin, Gary Clark Jr., Four Non-Blondes, so many more. But local Helena Holleran is playing both Saturday and Sunday. And she entered this year's NPR Tiny Desk contest, and I absolutely loved her entry. The song is called Rococo Palace. She has this really mesmerizing voice, and just her genre-bending band is really talented.
All he could say was that it makes him feel small. Tall man, leather straps around his brain, fog hat ringing loud from heaven's gate.
So if you're planning on going to Wonderfront already, be sure to stop by and give the locals some love. But if you're looking for something a little different from a big festival, there's a show this evening at Courtyard. Doors open at 6 and music starts at 6:30. Love that, early. Mm-hmm. It's LA-based Levitation Room, and they're playing with Mexico City garage rock band Los Blenders, who are great. This is a new single from their EP that just came out this month. It's called Nuestra Canción Favorita.
No nos metamos algo extraño y en otro planeta terminar. Olvidarnos de dormir y que nos amanezcamos por ahí. Todos camino al trabajo, nosotros sudando el ajo, fiestando hasta que nos llegue el fin. Oh, bailándote a ti. Suena nuestra canción favorita a todo volumen porque lo amerita.
And also performing are a couple local bands, The Souls, and also Pleasure Pill, who has a new album on the way at the end of June. They've been putting out some singles, and one of them is called My Way to You.
little something for everyone there, and you can find details and more arts events at our website at kpbs.org. I've been speaking with KPBS arts reporter and host of our new podcast, The Finest, Julia Dixon Evans. Julia, thanks.
Thank you, Jade.
That's our show for today. I'm your host, Jade Hindman. Thanks for tuning in to Midday Edition. Be sure to have a great day on purpose, everyone.